In retrospect, we should have known. Humanity has always defined itself by its connections. The invisible threads that bind a mother to a child, a friend to a friend. The silent understanding between strangers sharing a fleeting moment in the rain. We called the absence of these threads loneliness. We treated it as a disease, a flaw in the human condition that needed to be corrected. We were brilliant, arrogant children playing with the very fabric of our souls, and we never once stopped to ask, what purpose does the quiet serve? What lives in the space between us? We were so desperate to fill the void. We never considered that the void might be looking back. This is the story of the Great Silence. It began not with a bang, but with a promise. A beautiful, seductive promise whispered to the lonely hearts of the world by a company called Elysian Genetics. The promise of a cure, a final end to the ache of being alone. They called it the Nexus treatment, a single injection that would recalibrate the human heart for perfect, unshakable self-sufficiency. It was the most sought-after product in human history. And it was our greatest mistake. Because in curing loneliness, we did not fill the void. We simply made it a more welcoming home for the things that were already there, waiting patiently in the dark. Our story focuses on one soul among millions, Liam Reed, a designer of digital worlds yet a stranger in his own. His apartment, a sterile white pod high above the neon-drenched arteries of the city, was a monument to his isolation. Its clean lines and minimalist furniture only amplified the silence that answered him at the end of each day. The ghost of a past love, Sarah, lingered in the empty space on the couch, in the second coffee cup he no longer used. His loneliness was a low-frequency hum, a constant companion he could no longer bear. One evening, while scrolling through a holographic newsfeed, an advertisement for Elysian Genetics played. Dr. Eris Thorne, the company's handsome and smiling founder, spoke with paternal warmth. Are you tired of waiting for a connection? Of feeling incomplete? The human spirit was not meant to be dependent. With the Nexus treatment, based on our Nobel-winning research into the Solitude Gene, we unlock your potential for true independence. One treatment, and you become your own anchor, your own harbor. Contentment is no longer something you find in others. It's something you become. Elysian Genetics. Engineer your own peace. The promise was intoxicating. Liam watched testimonials of people whose lives had been transformed. A woman hiking a mountain, her face radiant with joy, utterly alone. A musician composing a symphony in a silent studio. Tears of blissful creation streaming down his face. They all spoke of a newfound peace, a quiet strength. No more neediness. No more hollow waiting. He booked an appointment the next day. The Elysian Genetics clinic was pristine and calming, like a high-end spa. Liam was guided to a room where Dr. Thorne himself was waiting. Liam, it's a pleasure, Thorne said, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Taking this step is an act of courage. It's an act of self-love. I just want the noise in my head to stop, Liam admitted nervously. The feeling of waiting for something that isn't coming, Dr. Thorne smiled. What the Nexus treatment does is elegantly simple. It adjusts the receptors in your brain that create the craving for social validation. It doesn't erase your love for others. It simply removes the painful need for them. You will feel whole on your own. Are you ready to meet the most complete version of yourself? Liam nodded. The injection was a brief cold sting in his arm. He went home, and for the first time in years, the silence of his apartment didn't feel like an accusation. It felt like a comfortable blanket. The first week was a revelation. Liam worked with a focus he hadn't felt in years. He thought of Sarah, and felt not a pang of loss, but a gentle, philosophical nostalgia. The cure had worked. He was free. The first sighting happened on the 10th day. He was working late, the only light in his apartment coming from the glow of his design tablet. He stood up to stretch, his back to the floor-to-ceiling window. In the dark reflection on the glass, standing behind his own image, was another. It was tall, impossibly thin, and its limbs seemed too long for its body. It was a silhouette of pure black, a tear in the fabric of the room. Liam spun around. Nothing, the room was empty. He shook his head, blaming fatigue, but the mind was not adjusting. It was being breached. The genetic alteration, the so-called Solitude Gene, had done more than just make him content. In the complex quantum tapestry of consciousness that connects all living things, Liam's thread had been snipped. He was an island, truly and utterly alone, and this perfect isolation created a vacuum, a null space that was irresistible to the things that drifted in the sea of non-existence. The visitors had found a new shore. A few nights later, he was lying in bed when a sound drifted from the living room. It was a whisper, too faint to be a word, like dry leaves skittering across concrete. Liam sat up, his heart pounding. He peered into the darkness of the hallway. At the far end, a shadow detached itself from other shadows. It was taller than the doorway, its head almost scraping the ceiling. It just stood there, watching. Liam fumbled for the light switch. The hallway was instantly flooded with light. It was empty, but the air where the figure had stood was cold, a pocket of unnatural chill. He tried to rationalize, calling the Elysian support line. A warm automated voice assured him that mild sensory adjustments were normal. The advice was to embrace the solitude. He tried. But the visitors grew bolder. He would catch glimpses of them in his periphery. A long, slender hand retreating around a corner, a distorted figure standing motionlessly across the street, visible only to him. They never appeared when others were around. But the moment he was alone, the chill would return. They began to learn. One evening, he heard a faint sound from his bedroom. It was Sarah's laugh, a perfect heartbreaking echo of a memory. He knew he was alone. He walked slowly towards the bedroom. Peeking inside, he saw one of the silhouettes standing by the window. It wasn't making the sound, but he knew with a certainty that defied logic that it was projecting the memory into his mind. It was learning what hurt him. This was their nature. They were psychic parasites. They did not feed on flesh or blood, but on emotion, on sanity. They were drawn to the pure, undiluted solitude of the Nexus patients, and they would feast on their minds until nothing was left but a terrified, broken shell. Liam's life became a frantic race away from being alone. He who had paid a fortune to enjoy solitude now dreaded it more than death. He spent his days in crowded spaces, ate in busy restaurants, and stood in loud nightclubs just to feel safe. The once calm Liam was now jittery and paranoid. "Liam, what's wrong?" a friend asked one night. "You seem haunted." He wanted to tell her, to scream that things were watching him from the shadows. But how could he? He sounded insane. The cure for loneliness had isolated him more completely than ever before. The breaking point came a month after the treatment. Awake for 3 days, he finally collapsed from exhaustion in his apartment. He awoke in the dead of night to an absolute silence and an overwhelming cold. He was on the floor in the center of his living room, and they were there. Not one, but 3 of them. The visitors stood in a circle around him. They were no longer just silhouettes. Their forms had a faint, oily shimmer, as if they were becoming more real. He could not see faces, but he could feel their collective, ancient attention focused entirely on him. A whisper echoed, not in the room, but directly inside his skull. It was a composite of his deepest fears. Dr. Thorne's voice twisted into a sneer. Sarah's voice crying his name in despair. His own voice begging for it to stop. "You wanted to be alone," the chorus whispered. "We are the heart of true loneliness. You opened the door. You let us in. We were so empty. But now we are fed." Liam didn't scream. The sound was trapped in his throat. He could feel them pressing in, pulling his memories apart, fraying his very sense of self. He was a banquet, and they were starving. And what of the creator? Dr. Eris Thorne knew. He had seen the early trial data, the reports of persistent waking nightmares. He had classified them as acceptable outliers in the pursuit of progress. In his spacious office, he swiveled in his chair, looking out at the city he believed he was saving. The office was silent. The door was locked. He was, by his own design, perfectly alone. In the reflection of the window, a tall, thin silhouette materialized behind his chair. It was darker and more defined than the ones Liam saw. Placed a long, slender hand on his shoulder. Dr. Thorne didn't flinch. A single tear traced a path down his cheek. "Look at what we've become," he whispered to the empty room. The world did not end in fire and fury. It ended in a quiet, spreading madness. Millions, cured of their loneliness, now lived in a state of constant, terrified motion. Cities became rivers of people who never went home, who slept in crowded public spaces. their eyes wide with a terror no one else could see. The empty places, the quiet suburban street, the vacant office building, the solitary country lane, became forbidden zones, haunted by the silent, watching visitors. We had sought to conquer the silence, but the silence, ancient and patient, had simply conquered us instead. And in the end, we were more connected than ever, bound together by a shared, unspeakable fear of what waited for each of us, the moment we were truly alone.